So I walked into a video game store in Tampa this weekend. I walked out with over 800 game cartridges. You're probably wondering how that happened. Well, stay tuned. You're about to find out. So we've got a really cool story today I want to share with you. Our story starts a few weeks back at the Southeast Game Exchange in South Carolina. We had such a great time meeting folks and buying games and seeing all the cool things to see. In the course of attending that show, we met up with a couple viewers of the channel, all four of them, by the way. One of them gave us some really cool insights onto the retro game scene in Florida. Apparently, there's a lot of cool stores, or so I was told, in Tampa. And I hadn't been video game hunting in Tampa previously, so I was excited to get that insight, and we made a mental note of it. Well, this weekend, we went ahead and made that road trip to Tampa to see what was going on. And it turns out that, yes, there are some really cool video game stores in Tampa. I look forward to doing a few more videos, cataloging some of our experiences in these really cool stores. I hope you'll enjoy that, but I want to focus. There's one particular video game store we visited in Tampa over this past weekend, and it was an amazing situation because I really didn't go into any of these stores with specific expectations of things I would find or purchases I would make. Just wanted to explore and see what was going on. So we wandered in, we walked into this store, and one of the things I noticed as I was walking through, they had a lot of cool Atari stuff. And of course, being, largely an Atari fella, this definitely spoke to me. So I enjoyed sifting through some cartridges and some bins and stuff of that nature. I also noticed that there was on the top of a shelving unit a little box that had dozens of completely unmarked mystery games that had no labels on them. And that's going to come into a focal part of the story in just a moment. But nonetheless, I was pretty excited about this. Had some fun small talk with the proprietors of this particular store. They noted that, it was interesting for them almost to see me take the kind of interest I did with the Atari. They just didn't have many people coming through in having that interest in wanting to buy Atari stuff. And I get that. Different communities will have different platforms and different types of games that they're looking for. Not every store is going to sell every generation of video game equally. In this particular case, in this area of Tampa, there just weren't any Atari collectors. I guess I couldn't help myself. I asked, do you have other Atari stuff? And the gentleman working there was like, yeah, we do. So what he did was, the store was laid out so there were two back rows of glass shelving units, back to back with a little space in the middle. And what it turns out was, if you move one of the end shelving units off to the side, it's sort of like a kind of a clever way to have storage, overflow stuff that the store had in totes lined up like floor to ceiling. And I looked, and there were just lots of totes, and he said, the totes here in the front, they're Atari. I said, well, that's amazing. Would you mind? Would you be okay with me looking through them? And you know what? He was such a good sport. This dude was super, super cool and said, you know what? Sure. And actually set up a folding table in the front of the store, opens up the first tote, and it is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cartridges. For me, I love lots like this where, it's not really clear what could be in there, and for someone who's looking with Atari for label variants, things that even the best game stores, you can't necessarily expect them to have a PhD in an almost 50-year-old platform in terms of, did you know that there were 9 different label variations of Yar's Revenge and this one is really desirable? You can't put it on a store to expect to have that encyclopedic knowledge. So oftentimes you'll see bulk Atari and there'll be some amazing things in there just kind of hidden diamonds in the rough. So it was all I could do to just not completely be able to poker face my excitement as I'm digging through the cartridges. Of course, my partner Cassandra Hammerstone was there, and we opened the second tote, and sure enough, it was more games, tons of boxed Atari. There was ColecoVision, there was Intellivision box stuff, and not like when you usually see Intellivision boxes, they're just destroyed. These actually were box games that had protectors around them, so they were in pretty decent shape, and I just couldn't believe it. It was just sorted through. One thing I missed is a detail. The first tote was actually a mix of Atari 2600 carts and Sega Genesis carts. Now, nothing high-end, mostly low-end stuff, a lot of sports games, but nonetheless, there was also hundreds of Genesis carts in there. Now, Cassandra Hammerstone, who was a Sega girl, noticed that and flocked over to the first tote and started digging with me. And we had a great time going through, and I found a couple things that I definitely didn't have that I had some interest in, and made a little pile of about a half dozen things. We took the items that we had, put together, and we brought them up and we worked out, a pricing for it. And while that conversation was happening, Cassandra Hammerstone mentioned pointed to the large cardboard box that had probably about 50 or 60 games where there was no labels. I guess that's where they would put a game that came in where both the labels from time had separated and gone missing. And we mentioned that, like, hey, I've got a YouTube channel. It'd be kind of fun content for me to have, maybe a dozen of these. I could do a stream where just for fun, we'll play whatever's on the cartridge, just like a kind of a randomized mystery Atari stream. And so we'd indicated, like, there's actually a reason we could actually care about this. The guy looks up at the box, looks at us, looks at the hundreds of pounds of totes he just lugged from the middle of the store, probably haven't been touched in years, and said, "You want to just buy everything?" Really? Well, I mean, I was kind of in shock that would even be on the table. So I kind of, after a few seconds, I said, what were you thinking? And at that point, the individual, managing the store, threw me a number that, I will respect the confidentiality of that transaction. But suffice to say, if I told you what I paid for this stuff, there would definitely be a Heck and Steve takedown video on me. I mean, he would use all the bad words, all his most vile venom. Quite frankly, I suspect he would also pull out his finishing move and call me an ass casserole. Steve, before you go all Spartacus on me on your channel, I just want you to understand something here. This was not a case of me bending over a seller, a video game store, lowballing them, or anything like that. See, this is a situation, this particular transaction, where both sides got something cool. I got a ton of stuff to sift through and play with, and that store needed that space a lot more than it needed those tubs of games that had been sitting there in storage. It was overflow. And again, these were console platforms that just simply don't have an audience in the geographic location of the store. We were talking about there is certain stuff they sell and they can't keep it on the shelves, and they make good money on it. But they've taken this stuff. Nobody takes in hundreds of Atari cartridges in one weekend. This is years of buildup of stuff that just was collecting dust. And as far as they were concerned, it might as well have been dust. So this was not an example of one party or another taking advantage of. This is a mutually beneficial transaction. They understood I'm kind of a unique hobbyist and that I love sifting through vintage, to use a record analogy. They desperately needed their space back, and everybody won. And as we were driving the all the way back to our part of Florida, I thought to myself, this is just a really big blessing. And I will tell you this, that prior to me recording and releasing this video, I had reached out to my inner circle of friends on social media with some pictures of this haul, and I've already got some outreach, some really cool folks in the community, some involved with charitable works, some involved with doing some really great things again in the community, and I've got a funny feeling we're going to be able to put a lot of this stuff to some real good. Again, I'm not here to try and make $1 million. I'm not a professional reseller. I don't rely on reselling to feed my family. I'm just a hobbyist that has a passion for this stuff, and I think it's going to be pretty cool what we're going to be able to do with this. And I'll leave you with this. This is obviously the first of a multi-part series. So what we're going to do here is give you a little teaser about what's to come. So we did get home and we started to sort through and go through all these things. In our next episode, we're going to focus on the Sega Genesis portion of this particular lot, of which there were over 300 cartridges. And I'm going to give you a little teaser photo here to show you what that looks like, having been taken from the lot and kind of sorted. Over 100 unique games, hundreds of cartridges in total. I encourage you to stay tuned. Please consider clicking like and subscribe. As always, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time on It's All Dug in Games.